Good morning, everybody. Happy Saturday. I wanted to spend a little time this morning on embossing. So this is something that I typically don't do in a video because the heat embossing tool is kind of loud and it's distracting. It's like watching somebody color or something. But today I wanted to cover it. We do have the heat tool and white, clear, gold, and silver embossing powder in the catalog, as well as the Versamark pad. So we'll get that out of the way. Um, so a couple things to think about when I'm talking about embossing. If you can see here, the lettering, the word congratulations is raised. Okay, so that's what I'm talking about with embossing. So we have embossing folders. That's usually referred to as dry embossing because that makes parts of the paper raised up. This is heat embossing because we have to use the heat gun. So just a quick demo. I'm only going to actually use the heat gun once, but I'm going to show you quite a few different techniques. And the reason, like I say, I'm only going to use it once is because it's kind of loud. So I wanted to make this card. So just to show you, you can emboss on cardstock, or this is actually designer series paper. So I'm going to do my first one on the designer series paper. But you always want to take your embossing buddy, as I call it, which if you don't have one, you can take a piece of fabric and sew it and put some baking powder in there. And then I'm just going to rub it here. And what that does is to take the static off of the paper. I'll show you in a little bit what happens if you don't do that first. All right, so if you have embossing, or if you have Versamark pad, you can use that to emboss with any color. All right, so the Versamark is clear, but it's sticky. So this is what you need. You need something sticky so that you can, the powder that we're going to put on it can stick to the paper. So I'm just going to, this is an old one because this is still a wooden stamp. I think it says 2001. So this has been around for quite a while. So when I stamp that, of course, you can't see it because it's clear. But when you put the powder on, I'm going to go ahead and sit this in here. It's like magic. All right. All right. Now, if you can see, there's just a couple of little pieces of powder that are not where I want them. That was because there was some static there or something else sticky. If you will wipe those off before you emboss, you'll be fine. If you leave them on, what will happen is that those will also become stuck to the paper. All right, so we're going to take our heat gun. It's got a low and a high setting. I'm going to go to high, and just pardon the noise. Let me stop that for a minute. Can you see? It's powdery, and we are going to emboss it until it becomes either shiny or melted looking. So and you don't, a lot of people will take their gun and go like this. You don't need to do that. Can you see how that's now becoming melted and shiny? It's very hot too, so you have to be careful. Can you see the TULA? Can you see how it just, and once it's all shiny, it's done. All right. Sit that down. Again, be careful. This is very hot. But can you see now that's on there? And then all I did was to add that to the front of the card with a couple of balloons, just for a fun congratulations card. So let me move this out of the way. Okay, so the next one I wanted to show you. Now, you could do that in black ink, in white ink, in silver or gold, and we're going to do a couple of those. But what if you wanted to emboss in a color? All right, so how you can do that is with, if you have the old stamp, what was it? The stamp positioner, Stamp-a-ma-jig. Do you remember the Stamp-a-ma-jig? Or if you have any kind of a stamp positioner, you can do this. And the reason I say you have to have a stamp positioner is because you need to be able to stamp twice exactly in the same position. So I'm going to put this in here. And the stamp positioner. If you're going to use red rubber stamps, then you don't have to use the little piece of elevator here. But if you're going to use a photopolymer stamp, then you have to use that just so that you're going to get a good image. All right, and I'm going to put my flamingo right where I want them. And then you can put the two magnets again. And again, be careful that you don't cross the magnets because they will stick together and can break when you get them apart. All right, so then I'm going to just take this, and that's where I want. Push that back down, check. Okay, so this is where I want to stamp it. So I'm going to stamp it for the first time in Flirty Flamingo. And again, you can use this stamp positioner for just any stamping. It doesn't have to be for embossing. I'm going to press that down. Now the nice thing here is that if something in my image had not come out, I could just stamp it again. I could ink it and stamp it again. So that's one of the benefits of using that. Now I'm going to take a wipe. I'm going to wipe this off. You can also use your chamois, which I usually will do. It's just not real close to me right now. Okay, so we're going to wait for a minute for that to dry. All right, so now I'm going to stamp over exactly the same place with the Versamark. All right, so that's going to stamp in clear, but provide a sticky surface now that I can use my clear embossing powder. All right, so let's do that. All right, I'm going to stamp in the exact same place. And then I'm going to take this out and sprinkle it with my crystal clear embossing powder. Now you can use, you saw that I was using my little pan before, but you can also use just a piece of scrap paper to catch the excess. I had left the black in there, so I don't want to use that this time. And then you're just going to pour the residual back in there. And I don't know if you can see this or not, but can you see that it's powdery now? Right, so then when I run the heat gun on top of it, again, as promised, I only did that once, it's going to come out shiny like this. Now, can you see here on the end where it's not shiny? I missed that with the Versamark. So I could go back if I wanted to put it in the stamp positioner again, stamp that again, put the clear powder on it and do it. But I thought I would just leave it just so that you can see. So this one I just took some plain greenery designer series paper and stamped a couple of those flowers just so that it would bring out that flamingo color. And that's a good way that you can then emboss in any color. Okay, move that out of the way. All right, so next, I know I've talked before about watercolor. And you can watercolor with ink, with pencils, with crayons. You know, there's all kinds of watercolor mediums that you can use. But if you can see, I've already embossed this in the gold embossing powder. And I think that that provides a really easy way to emboss and to watercolor. That's what I get for trying to think and color at the same time. Because what happens is when you've embossed this first, you have like a barrier. So the blue here is not going to go into the shell. If you had just stamped in like StazOn or something, then your water sometimes will, carry over and you'll get a mixing of the colors. If you emboss first, then the embossing keeps it contained. It's like a wall. Okay, and then I would just put that on top of the paper here, and I'll finish watercoloring that later. But just wanted to show you, and I especially like to emboss in gold if I'm going to watercolor. I don't know, it just seems to make it pop or something. You can do it in any color, including using it in clear and just having a clear barrier. But I like the gold. Okay, so now let's look at this. And as promised, I'm going to show you how a couple of problems can happen. All right, so here I stamped in black on craft paper, on the crumb cake. Okay, and I really like the way this one looks. And then at the end, I sponged some espresso around the edges. So to show you what can happen, let me bring the black back up here because we're going to do this in black. Again, I'm going to take my embossing buddy and then I want to stamp a couple of these poppies. You can kind of see the tone on here. Okay, now I would not stamp the entire card because I think the ink has time to dry then. But what I wanted to show you was, see how on this stamp, the inside here has picked up some of that Versamark? Then my powder wants to stick to it. So if you will take, you can use a pencil eraser. I'm going to use a paintbrush. This is a dry paintbrush. And just brush that area off that you don't want before heating it. Because if I had started heating it before doing that, then all those black areas would stay there where the ink was that I didn't want it. So I would do a couple of these and then I would go back and just do a couple of the leaves. And this powder can stay on here without heating for an indefinite amount of time. The problem is if you knock into it or something, you will knock the powder off, but the powder itself won't come off until you take it off. So see, then I can stamp a couple of the leaves. And again, then sprinkle some powder on them. Knock that off. And can you see over there? I think that's probably where I grabbed it with my finger before, and the oils off of your hand will cause it to stick. But again, just take your paintbrush and take off any of the powder that you don't want. So again, I could have, a lot of people may go ahead and just stamp them all, put the powder on them all, but I think it just doesn't stick as well if you do that. So I would do 2 or 3 of the flowers and then a couple of the leaves and then the letters, and just do it because it doesn't matter. This will stay just like this, and then you can heat it all at once. I really liked putting that espresso around. I think it gave it a very kind of an antique look. All right, so I wanted to do one more. because I promised you last week when we did our video that I used the gilded leafing, remember, that you could also use that with the heat embossing. So this is the card I made. And it can kind of show you the difference between the gold embossing powder. See how that's kind of an antique-y looking, and the golded or the gilded leafing. See how it's like a brighter gold. So how I did this, I went ahead and stamped and embossed the gold, and then I stamped the stem and went ahead and stamped the leaves once, because when I did it without the leaves in the background, it didn't look full to me, I guess is the right word. All right, so then I was going to stamp with the Versamark. And we do not sell this anymore, but there's a sticky embossing powder that you can basically works like a glue. I'm going to stamp this up where it was before. I don't want it in exactly the same place. All right, so I've stamped in the Versamark, and then I'm going to add the powder. I think I will actually have to heat one more time. Can you see how the powdery leaves are on there? I will have to heat one more time so I can show you how to use this gilded leafing. All right, so but with this, what you want to do is you want to heat it right until it melts. Okay, and then immediately you're going to stop, because you don't want to heat it till it like hardens, right? And you're going to heat it, and then you're going to add the leafing. Now, if I opened this now and turned on the heat gun, this gilded leafing is going to go everywhere. So I'm just getting the lid off a little bit. I'm sorry, I will just use this one more time. This goes very quickly. You can see it's shiny, but it's clear, all right? And then I'm going to dump all that gold leafing right on top of it. And press it down. Oops, there was another little sticky part right there. I could feel with my finger. This looks like a mess, doesn't it? All right. Okay, so this does not all tap off just as easily as the embossing powder does, but the end result is still pretty. Okay, I'll do the rest of that later. All right, so now you can take your finger. I give it a minute to, adhere. And take your finger and kind of start to just brush across here to get off some of the excess. And you can see I still have a little bit of a blob. So then I take just a clean sponge, and you can see when I sponge across, it's only going to be leaving the gilded leafing right where I had it sticky. See? Isn't that pretty? I really, really, really like this. So you just need something sticky, to make it go. And last time I used the tape, but this time that heat and stick powder is what you would call it, I guess. Heat and stick powder will make it stick like that. So I think everybody, or not everybody, me, I forget about embossing and getting out the tools and everything that I need. But you can see you can emboss with the gold powder and the gilded leafing. You can emboss in black on a color, and that adds a really pretty look. You can just emboss plain, on a piece of designer series paper or cardstock. You can emboss in color. just by adding the Versamark over top of any ink color. And I hope that you will try embossing, heat embossing. All right, have a great day.